friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Alex, and today we're not gonna code. Instead, I want to talk about Cloudflare Tunnel. And I know I'm probably a little bit late to the party because I've seen so many people use it already, but I just recently started deploying it for my own infrastructure. So in this video, I want to talk about what is Cloudflare Tunnel, why does it matter, and how to quickly set it up. All right, so the idea of Cloudflare Tunnel is pretty easy. So back in the day, when I wanted to set up my first applications, you usually had to get a dedicated server somewhere and then provide an Nginx or anything like that, and then purchase an SSL certificate from somewhere and then manually install it. So there wasn't even Let's Encrypt, who then just went to provide free certificates, but it was a really massive process. You actually had to configure the firewall so you could use the ports 443, 80, etc. So there was a lot involved to just getting up a simple web application, for example. So how is this different when you use Cloudflare Tunnel? Well, the idea is that you install their agent on a machine, for example, and it just establishes a direct tunnel between the Cloudflare infrastructure. And that client on the local machine is able to communicate with your web application, for example. That could be a Spring application or anything like that. And then what you can do in Cloudflare is you can have a public domain that you can just map to that Cloudflare tunnel. So as I'm going to show you, you can have axgr.dev, which is my domain, and then use a subdomain to just route traffic through Cloudflare to that local machine. It's encrypted, you don't have to mess with the firewall, and it's pretty secure, all assuming that you trust Cloudflare with all your traffic. So I highlight some of the advantages and disadvantages at the end of the video, but let's jump right in. So the first thing that I want to do is spin up a virtual machine, and I'm usually using Linode for this. So you can see my dashboard here, and I'm going to start with create a new Linode, and then we just pick the operating system. I'm going to go with Ubuntu 2024. Selecting Frankfurt as the region because that's the closest to me. I'm in Germany. I use shared CPU. I use a nanode, pretty much the smallest node that you can provision, because that's enough. And let's say this is Cloudflare demo. Oh, so I just copy over the password that I already created, so I don't have to type here. I provide my SSH keys, though they are not required, and I say create node. And that actually might take a minute or two. We are waiting here for the Linode to appear. As you can see, the Linode switched to running, so that means it's up and running, and I get the SSH access here. So I just copy that. You can see the public IP address that I got is 139.162.161.4. And let's see if we can connect to that. So in the terminal, let's just paste that and then see if we can connect. So as you can see, I'm now connected to the virtual machine. It's an empty Ubuntu machine. So the first thing that we're going to do is we install Docker, because what I want to show you is that I can bring up a Docker container, and we're going to use the Nginx one for this because it's web facing. And then we install Cloudflare as well as a Docker container, and then bring them to the same network so we can use DNS. So the Cloudflare container can resolve the Nginx container by its name. First thing that we're going to do is I just copy paste these commands. I have them prepared already. So I just say, okay, let's go get the Docker install script and now installed. So you shouldn't do this blindly. Just make sure that you're getting the right thing. So you can look at the shell script that I just loaded. Make sure the checksum is correct and all of that. I'm just trusting it for now because this is a throwaway machine anyway. So it's installing here. I'll just give it a few more seconds. All right, that has finished. I just keep running everything as root, though you could as well use your personal user for that one. So now I have to create a network first. So let's go here and say Docker network, create my network. The reason I have to create my own network and not use the one that Docker brings by default is that in the default network, there is no DNS. So containers cannot resolve themselves or between each other using DNS. We have to create our own bridge network. Now let's create our first container. So this is the Nginx, you can see that I'm loading here. I attach it to my network that we just created, and I make sure that it runs detached. So it's the Nginx, and the name that I attached to the container is web. So we're going to need that later on. So let's bring it up. And it's downloading the image and it's running. So if I do image, no, not image, but Docker container, checking the containers, we can see that the Nginx is up and running. So let's check it. So to see if this works, we just copy this address, and then the port is, which one is it? I think it's 8000. Let's try that. Nope, doesn't look correct. Let's do 8080. That's correct. So you can see at port 8080, I can now reach the Nginx. So it's available, but it's using HTTP, it's the IP address, which is also all not that nice. And instead I want to use my own domain with a proper certificate. And this is where we now start using the Cloudflare tunnel. Let's go to Cloudflare. You can see that I'm here in my own organization, and there is an area that is called Zero Trust. So I go there. And now it's loading, and it's not lost on me that it's called Zero Trust, but you have to trust Cloudflare that this all works, but we'll get to that in a second. So in the Zero Trust overview, we just go to Access, and then we just go to Tunnels. So you can see I have an existing tunnel here already, but let's create a new one. So give it a name. So I say this is Cloudflare Demo, but you can just name it anything that you want. It doesn't really matter, it's just for you. So I save the tunnel, and then Cloudflare provides me with installation instructions. So I have multiple ways of doing this. I could directly install this on the host system, but instead I choose the Docker route. And the reason is that it's isolated, and I can just make sure that access is available to the other Docker containers because it's in the same network. So you can already see that below here, it's searching for the connectors, but there are none installed. So let's quickly go back to the console, and now I just paste in the installation instructions. I added 2 more things like -d to make sure it's running detached, and then also attaching it to the correct network. So it has a secret token here for that specific tunnel. That's gonna go to the trash after the video anyway, so it's just fine. You can see that it's pulling the Cloudflare D image, and now if we just check if it's running, oh, that was too fast, container, you can see Nginx is running and Cloudflare is running. So if we now go back here, we can see there's a connector. So it's actually connected, which is pretty nice. So how do we configure this thing now? Now we hit next, and now I can provide a public host name for this tunnel. So in order for this to work, I have to manage the domain within Cloudflare, and I have a couple of here. So let's pick one. So I'm going with axgr.dev, and the subdomain that I want to use is, let's just call it demo. So I leave the path blank, and now I can say, okay, HTTP, because in between the Docker containers on the host system, it's HTTP. There's no HTTPS just yet. So, and here what I can do is I just type web, and that's all there is to it, because web is the name of the Nginx container, and it's in the same network as the Cloudflare container. So I can just say HTTP:// web, and now we just save the tunnel. So it popped up here, it says it's healthy, so I can now just copy that. And if you see that, this is the Nginx. So I'm here at demo.axgr.dev, and this is routing traffic to the container, and it has a valid SSL certificate. It's a public domain, it doesn't expose even the private IP. And while this is all nice and frictionless, there's of course one big downside, like the elephant in the room. For this to work, Cloudflare has to have access to all the traffic that you route through it unencrypted. So that means Cloudflare is terminating the TLS connection, then has all the data in plain text, because it needs it to forward to that specific tunnel, which then can forward it to the actual application. And of course, that is a big issue. Like, you have to trust Cloudflare to be nice. And it might also be an attack vector, because if someone gets a hold of Cloudflare, they can just jump into your machine and then do whatever else is possible, right? It seems to be quite secure from the way they set this up, but again, there are no guarantees. So, and to be honest, I don't trust them enough to have it running in my own home lab, but instead what I do is what I just showed you. I go to Linode, and I spin up a new Linode for one specific application, and then install the container over there. By the way, if you use the link in the description down below, you get a $100 credit for Linode. And that wraps it up. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. I find it again quite frictionless and easy to use if you keep the security considerations in mind. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you on the next one.